Ivan Dunduru. I was a Canon Collins scholar back in 2014. And what drew me to this is the word impactful. I work in impact measurement. So, generating impactful ideas, publishing ideas is something of interest to me. I'm calling from Mozambique.
Oh, nice. Hi, Ivan. Which scholarship did you receive from Canon Collins, just out of interest?
Yes, I was a Canon Collins scholar attending SOAS University of London.
Oh, nice. Fantastic. Welcome.
Okay, I'll go next. Hi, my name is Princess Sibanda, Canon Collins alumni. I was also the Scholar 2018. They funded my PhD at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I'm here because I love Prof Maano. So I took the opportunity to follow him, but obviously I love the topic at hand. And I'm hoping to learn a lot from her, because now I'm at a point where I've just finished my PhD, so I'm now getting into my postdoc. So I think this is very relevant for me as I embark on a journey of publishing and setting my foot in the academic world.
Okay, fantastic. Welcome, Princess, and congratulations on completing your PhD. I have to say, Princess is graduating in a few weeks. So yeah, that's quite amazing. I know you are joining us. Yes, Prof Maano is clapping his hands for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, you're joining us from Durban?
Indeed, from Durban.
Okay, how is it looking in Durban today?
It's fine, it's warm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good weather.
Fantastic. I see Clayton is up as well.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Clayton Moyo. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of the Witwatersrand, and I am a recipient of the Soul Black Scholarship. I am in Bulawayo today, and I think this is a great platform because I'm already in the academia as an early career researcher. So I think this is timeless for me because I really need to get the ideas as I progress, and I would like to publish the other scholars, especially those who are now established. So I think this is going to be quite insightful and great for me. Yeah.
Well, two things, Clayton, amazing things. Firstly, I think everyone that I've talked to was moved by the piece that you wrote that went to the Mail and Guardian. That was quite phenomenal. And second thing, I'm so jealous because you're in my hometown. So yeah, I wish I was there, but no, but nice to have you, Clayton. Nice to have you. I really enjoyed your writing. Let's see who else, and I'm seeing a few people.
I'll go next.
Yes, go ahead.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Angelique Thomas. I'm going to leave my camera off just because of connection issues. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Cape Town and a Canon Collins Fellow for the Tom Kleber Scholarship. And my interest is really wanting to publish. I mean, I've been a co-author, but hopefully this year will be my first publication as a first author. And I really, the title of the talk said generating meaningful ideas, which I thought was so important. I think we all have amazing ideas and there's so much going like in our brains, but how do we write meaningful papers? And I think that's what I'm really interested in getting from this talk today. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Welcome. Sorry, in case I didn't catch it, where are you joining us from?
Cape Town.
Okay. I don't know why I'm suddenly obsessed about where everybody is, but I think it gives me a sense of how wide this geographically our connection is. If you're just joining us, welcome. Everyone is I'm giving everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves, who you are, where you're joining us from, which Canon Collins scholarship you're under, and also just to let us know what are you looking forward to regards with this meeting. I see I have about 1 or 2 other people that haven't introduced themselves before I move on to Prof.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, so this is Pilira Tembo, a PhD candidate at University of Pretoria, also a Canon Collins scholar. As an early researcher, I am so happy that we are actually attending this, hoping to gain a lot from this session. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, Pilira. Welcome. We look forward to the engagement. I think one other person, Atenkosi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Name is Atenkosi. I didn't know this meeting was happening, but immediately when I saw what it was about, I was like, funny enough, I was actually asking myself this question of how do I actually go about publishing articles? It's my current study is I'm doing a PhD at the University of Pretoria, focusing on designing and implementing a training model for teachers so that they can be able to teach online and give them the necessary skill sets that they need for that. I've been asking this question of how to publish because I'm currently finishing off a chapter that was included in a book. And then also I have some presentation that's coming up that was accepted, like I had to submit an abstract and then they accepted it. And then I'll be doing like a presentation, which I need to submit this week. So it started making me think about, wait, like how do I actually go about now saying I want to collaborate with other people and write articles and journals, because I want to be a full like academic. That's where I want to go.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think it sounds like things are a bit hectic on your side, and I can see a few heads nodding that people resonate with sort of the fast-paced publishing, moving from one piece to another. It would be lovely to talk about that as well. We also have, our lovely colleagues from Canon Collins. Jill and Nia, would you love to introduce yourselves to everybody? I'm sure everybody knows you, but for the sake of the meeting, introduce yourselves and let us know where you are.
Okay, thanks. I'll jump in there because I want to say something about you, and that you may not want me to say, but I'm saying it anyway. I'm Gillian, for those of you I haven't met in person. I just was really pleased when Maano agreed to do this workshop, because you actually couldn't listen to anybody better. I'm a bit in Princess's camp of being an ardent fan. So from our side, it's just so lovely to welcome everybody together into the space and to talk and to get ideas from one another. And then from a sort of, Prof, you may not know this, but from our side, Nia and Eva and I have talked about publishing some work around scholarships and impact of scholarships and evaluation. That's the bit, Nia, that you may not want me to say. But so from our side, we're also interested in just learning about, what's most impactful and how do you shine a spotlight on that and get ideas out there. But welcome, everyone. Lovely to be here with you.
Okay.
And just echoing what Jill said, firstly introduce myself, Nia. Probably know me from emails mainly, but this is a wonderful opportunity that we can get together, and we, as Gillian said, we really look up to Maano and his academic eye on things, and we have been doing a lot of work on monitoring and evaluation and learning, and there's a lot of articles that we've been reading recently, and it would be really good to be able to contribute on that kind of level. So also here to learn.
Fantastic, fantastic. I look forward to, from what everybody has said, it sounds like we're going to have a lovely conversation. Without much further ado, I'd like to introduce Prof Maano Ramutsindela. I have to say that when I got the opportunity to be in a meeting with him and we started talking about some of his publications, I think in that meeting earlier on this year, we're talking about he had just released a co-edited book, which is the Routledge or Handbook of Development and Environment. And at that time, we were just congratulating him and trying to find out, because as a young academic, that's one thing that I look up to people who publish, but not only publishing just tons and tons of work, but meaningful work and what that means. And for me at that time, actually, I asked him, I was like, Prof, you should teach us how to, you have a talk with us on how to publish. And he quickly corrected me in a way that was quite unique. He said, I think young academics don't need to learn how to write, because you can always learn how to write, but young academics need to know how to develop publishable and impactful ideas. And for me, that was like, okay, how do we do that? Can we have a talk around that? And generously, he agreed. So for, if you don't know who he is, Prof Maano is an NRF-rated researcher. He is currently the Dean of Science at University of Cape Town. He is well published internationally, regionally, locally. He is also an elected member of the Academy of Science of South Africa, ASAF. And that just speaks to the caliber of his work. I mean, we could go on and on and on about what he writes and how he's written, how much he's written. But I think one of the things about his writing is the level of impact that it has. The new book that I just saw today, he's got a book out called The Violence of Conservation in Africa, and I'm really looking forward to check it out. Because there is a way that you write, Prof, that cuts across disciplines and engages people, even people who are not in your field, with your work. And I think that is a particularly unique skill that you have. But also interestingly for us, Prof is also a Canon Collins alumni, and for many, many years has been on the Canon Collins Trust board. And he's always been very generous with his time. I think for some of you who've been to the conferences or any Canon Collins events, you will see his face around. He's very generous with his time. And I find that something that is very unique about him as well. For somebody who is as busy as you are, Prof, you always find time to engage, to collaborate, to reach out, to assist, to share ideas. And that's very, very inspiring. Anyway, without much ado, Prof, I'm going to hand over to you. But one quick one before I do, sorry. It's a conversation that we want to have with Prof. So he will speak a little, but I think we're going to open it up very quickly for questions. And feel free to bring up your questions. He will open it up for us once he's given us his bit. And we will be in conversation with him. And I like that it's a very intimate group, so we can do that without feeling like we are jumping onto anything. So I see the poll has gone up, and now I hand over to Prof. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Precious, for the introduction. I'm always nervous when introductions are made. But with Google, I just know that people can Google you and find out everything. So it is no longer as as difficult as it was in the past. And so thank you for Julian and Nia for arranging this conversation, and for everyone to join in. I'm glad that we are a small group, so we can have a very lovely conversation. I just thought we need to have this kind of conversation after talking to Precious. I was convinced that, well, this is what I missed in my early years as an academic, and I wouldn't like others to miss it. So it's I'm giving you what I've missed in some ways. And doing so would allow you perhaps not to wait for too long to reach the stars in your field, to become what you are most likely to be, given the training that you have had in your own field. Publishing it's a very complex enterprise, but it is at the heart of scholarship. And so, I mean, scholars are differentiated from other professions by publishing. And of course, if you have been trained in your field, that's okay. It gives you the opportunity to become a scholar. There's a difference between being, going through your studies and becoming a scholar, and that transition is quite important to make. And how we make that sometimes is by sheer luck or by having proper guidance. Universities have different approaches to this. Supervisors too have different approaches to this. But sometimes it might not come your way. And so this conversation would help. I'm going to structure this conversation in some themes, so that we can discuss, or you can ask questions per theme or sub-theme, but it's all about academic writing. And listening to some of you, I get a sense of you want to get an idea of where to start. Okay. I mean, starting points are multiple, depending on the fields. So I'm thinking of experimental fields, where you do experiments. Once you get the results, the supervisor will say, well, this is very interesting results. Why don't we publish them? And so the starting point could be just after generating results in the experimental fields, or in fieldwork-based fields. You go out as a geologist, you find out the types of rocks that are interesting to tell the world about, and you can describe them. Those in the biological sciences are sometimes intrigued by certain plants, and as soon as they find them, they say, wow, we need to let the world know about this. And so the starting point differs. And in the social sciences, the starting point is very difficult, because there aren't many tangible things that you do. It's more about ideas. You thinking of people in literature who are trying to analyze the writings of Chinua Achebe, for example, and so they've got to do the analysis first before they can write. So the starting point is something that we have to decide. We have to decide that now it is time to write. But there are people who never decide. So they do their studies and don't decide that it is time to write. they complete their studies, they take another degree, and complete the degree and go for another degree. and so it could be just the training that is endless. So I would think that the best way to think of a starting point it's when you have got something to write about, something that excites you, something that you feel you can share with the rest of the community of scholars in your field or across fields even. So that point, it needs a conscious decision. Sometimes students are pushed by the supervisors to say, now we need to write. And at other times, they're pushed by universities to say, you can't graduate this degree until you publish something. And I think this is what, I'm just trying to get the name here, from UNISA. Is it Mutumbiko, who, that's part of the degree. And why universities do that as a requirement is because they want to generate more publications. The more students graduate, the more publications they have, which is important for the university. And I would think that if you want to start somewhere to publish, there are certain things to avoid. There are, at the moment, many journals that are all over the place, and they are always looking out for students who are completing their studies. As soon as you put your dissertation online, then they approach you to say, well, why don't you publish? Why don't you publish this? We think this is exciting. And you also feel excited that, somebody likes my work. But that has become, I don't want to use the dangerous word of a mafia, but that has become a very, very difficult aspect of the industry. There are just so many publishing houses out there, some of whom are just out to make money. So they will say, if you pay so much, we will publish your article in the next 2 weeks. And you feel, well, people will know me. I will have published. But that's a false starting point. So my advice would be, do not be pushed to have a start in publishing. It should be your decision that I want to publish this. But I'll come later on to say, where do you publish? What do you have to consider in terms of publishing? Because that's where the impact will also come from. But the starting point at the moment, in some quarters, is a push that you have to publish this. And if you're pushed to publish without your own willingness to do so, then publishing becomes a hard job to do, because it is important for you to decide, I want to become myself, because by publishing something, you're also defining yourself. You're introducing yourself to the rest of the academic community, so that they can know who you are, what you do. And I'll give a personal experience about this. When I wanted to publish something very early on in my career, I picked up a journal which has got a very good name, but the journal was simply using that name when it is, in fact, what we call predatory journals now. And so I sent the paper in there. I never got any reviews. I never got any comments on the paper. And the next time I got my art proof, I didn't even get proofs. The next time I got I got a paper that was published, and it was just a copy of the paper that, now you have published the paper. And I just said, no, this can't be true. This can't be true. You can't be so lucky that your paper is without any error, doesn't warrant any comment. But it was not, I wouldn't say it was a predatory journal, but it was those journals that are always looking out for material to fill in so they can release the issue. And it could be that they didn't have time to review. I mean, I don't know, I'm just guessing here. It was it was before the fashionable predatory journals were in place. So that was a surprise to me, because I wanted to publish, but when I saw that, I said, no, I don't want to publish, actually. And then I published another article from my PhD, which went into a journal which I didn't even know. It's a very impactful journal that everybody in the field reads. And when that article came out, I was surprised that people started looking at me differently when I go to conferences. And I did not know what that meant. It's because I had published in a journal that people in my area would read. Almost everybody in the area reads that journal. So I was still in the dark about that. Still from my PhD, I had an article that I published, and it was on the first page of the journal. And somebody said, wow, you've done very well. And I was completely lost. They say, well, if your article is in the first page, is the first in the lineup of an issue, it means they're using that article to sell the issue. And all these things were just sheer luck in some ways, because I did not know how publishing is structured, what it meant at the time. But later on, it gave me insight into what we should do. And this is what I want to share with you today. It's what the publishing environment looks like, and how we should handle that. I mean, some of you would benefit from your own supervisors on this. Of course, the difficulty in publishing is, after you have published, where do you go? You have published your results from the dissertations, from the thesis, where next if you want to be an academic? And that's where things become a bit difficult. And I will touch on those as we go along. But just as a preface to that discussion, I think it's important to have a sense of the kinds of questions you want to tackle in your publishing career. But these questions can't be predetermined. You can't say beforehand that I want to spend the rest of my life answering these questions, because the questions will change. The world keeps changing, and as it changes, it throws up many questions that we need to grapple with. So I always joke with the students who come to me to say, what topic can I research on? And I just say, well, there are hundreds of topics. You might just choose one. And all I'm trying to say by responding like that is, there are too many questions we should be asking. Just ask one of the questions, and that becomes your research area. So I think that's very key. And one aspect of consideration, I would say, is the objective of publishing. Why do you want to publish? If somebody says, I'm going to publish a book, I'm going to publish an article, I'm interested in why they want to publish that. So there are two groups of people. And one group is made up of people who want to publish everything that they think about, and or anything that they research they want to publish. The other group publishes when it is necessary to publish, and that differentiates the groups of people. So the first group has got a sense of accomplishment by counting how many publications they have in the portfolio. So that they, in the CV, they can say, I've got so many publications, and that means they are great. And coming back to the metrics, they think that the numbers are the measurement of scholarship. But in the South African context, that even got polluted by our subsidy system, because the more you publish in subsidy journal articles, which I'll explain later, the more the university gets the subsidy from government. And in some cases, when an academic publishes an article, you get part of that into your research fund. I understand in some universities, when you publish, you can get a small percentage of that into your salary. So who wouldn't like to publish as many papers as they want? Because then you can create a bonus out of publishing. So there are universities, I don't want to mention them, where these things happen, and people they publish anything that they can send to a journal, and these will usually be low impact journals that are obscure, that nobody reads about, that they themselves will have to cite themselves in order to say that the work has been read. But in some cases, people publish in medium impactful journals, and that's fine. But I think that's in the South African context, that has been one of the major drivers of publishing. Is if you publish as many papers as you can, you can get some money. And who doesn't want money? And I think that objective is works against creating the kind of scholarship that I would personally want to see from all of you, which is not driven by, and I'm not saying you should be poor academics by so saying, but it should be driven by something more than just getting the payment from your publication, or getting some conference money from a publication. And maybe those objectives should be clearly defined. I had to decide myself how I would measure my own scholarship, and I did not think of measuring my scholarship by competing with somebody else, but by competing with myself. What is the best thing I could do? Okay, and I will write an article or publish something, and when I read it after some time, I say, why did I write something like this? I should have been better. And so it's a sort of self-reflection in the writing, and so this explains what do you do next when you have published. You must be reflective of your writing. You must ask questions. 5 years after publishing an article, you should read it back and read it again and say, is that all I could have said? Is there something else I should have said? Because that improves your own scholarship. Of course, you can get other people commenting on what you write and so forth, which is important. But it should be helpful for you to be self-reflective. Why would I write something like this? So talking about measurements, we have to decide who could be where's the best measure. And I'll give one example of how I came to think about measurements, measuring my own scholarship. In my earlier years, it was, I think, after masters, I wanted to attend a conference and send an abstract, which was rejected. They didn't give me reasons why the abstract was, it was a local conference, why it was rejected. In the same year, I sent an abstract overseas and it was accepted. And I just say, well, this world has got many judges. You know, you don't have to be discouraged by one judge, because matters of quality in scholarship are not determined by, you know, one group or even one academic grouping or community. But you have to test the waters. And so I felt very bad when I couldn't even present my master's results to a local conference. And I just said, well, it means I'm going nowhere. It was a very difficult moment. But I then realized that an overseas conference, it was actually Newcastle upon Tyne, which I attended, and it was my first flight to the UK, my first flight actually in my life. And my first flight to this international conference. But what came out of that conference, you know, it's something that might interest you. Two things which I recall very well. One was that the organizer of the conference, and this is what you told me later, read my abstract and said I could organize an edited volume around these ideas. And so invited me to contribute a chapter. At the same conference, one publisher who came there to listen to, I mean, they're always scouting for authors and things like that. One publisher who ignored my proposal to write a book came to attend this conference. And after that conference, wrote back to me to say, well, you know, we corresponded about the book and so forth. Sorry for the delays. Will you be interested in writing a book for us? So, and I was just so confused. You know, on one hand, your scholarship is treated as nothing, and this is at home. And you go abroad, make a presentation, and this was just a master's dissertation. It was not something out of this world. It was just typical masters, but perhaps with some interesting ideas. And I got these two things. And I then realized that in order to get published and to be yourself, you have to decide very clearly about what is it that you want to pursue with your publications. You know, I just imagine if my abstract to a local conference was almost the measure of my success, I would have just stopped there. That, you know, I'm going nowhere. But I think the world is wide enough to allow us to, you know, to think more broadly about publishing. So it is important to be very clear about the objective, about the aim of publishing. Yeah. I'll pause here and see if there are any questions and comments any of you would like to make before I proceed. I thought we have ample time, but we have almost exhausted an hour now.
I was thinking the exact same thing, Prof, because I just checked the time now and I'm wondering, where is it going?
Yeah.
I have a few questions myself, but I think in fairness, I will open up to others first, and then I will pose my questions. So anybody who has a question or a comment for Prof at this point?
Okay, I see one hand there. Princess? Yeah, okay, Princess.
Thank you, Prof, for the enlightening talk that you've given, and I've learned a lot of things from it. And I have questions around, especially the book proposal that you made just after your master's. So when I finished my master's, the examiners recommended that I publish it as a book or into a book. And then my PhD results as well, one of the examiners said I should consider a monogram publication of something. I think it's sort of like I should have a book from it as well, because I ignored it at master's, and now I'm thinking maybe it's something I should think about, but I don't know where to start.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting question. I should tell you my own story. I did not know how to write a book proposal when I wrote my first book. And I asked one academic, how does one write a book? And the advice was, just write, just write. And I just felt, well, this answer was not very satisfactory. Different publishers have got at least now a template for book proposal, and the proposal should have a very clear argument. Why are you writing this book? And this ties to what I was talking about earlier on about having a very clear goal why you're writing something. So the publishers would like to know why you're writing a book. Which other books are out there that will compete with the book you're writing? So you need to be very clear about the gaps that you want to fill in. You want to be very clear about what other books have been missing. And I would say, you should avoid arguments such as, I'm writing this book on Southern Africa because similar topics have been written about the same thing in Europe, because then it doesn't become a very strong argument to make. It almost like, you want to give an example of Southern Africa on the same thing that has been written about. And this is where ideas become important. What is your idea about the book? Books are all about ideas. Every book should be about one thing, actually. I mean, it's just that there are so many chapters in a book, but they should be supporting a particular idea. In the social sciences, those in the social sciences would know some of the influential books written by South African authors. Just thinking of The Rise and Fall of the Peasantry. And which was more about agrarian reform. Those of in literature, of course, will know Things Fall Apart, which still today has got a very clear message. Yeah. And so the book is about a message, and there should be one message about the book. What do you want to tell the world about this? And there are ideas in a book that will sell better than other ideas, and I'll come back to ideas, in the next conversation, in the next theme of our conversation. But to answer your question, Princess, you need to think of what you want to write about and why it is important to write about that. So if you're writing a book, it should be very clear why that can be an article, for example. Is this something that needs more space in order to make the argument clearer? So I think that would be quite useful to think about. And other things you'll find in the format. Of course, you will have to choose a good publisher, and so the publishing industry, as I said, has grown very much in the last few years, and one has to be careful about where to publish, The easiest way to find out where to publish is sometimes just to follow where your most respected scholars, your most respected figures in your field have published in, and that will give you a sense of where you might want to aim for. And because that's where the impact will come from in terms of scholarship. And I'm talking about impact here in terms of matrices that are used to measure the impact of journals, which is more about whether there is readership in this journal, whether this journal is cited more than others in this field. So the top journal will be the most cited journals in the field. And if you publish in those journals, you know that people will know you have arrived. You know, they might not cite you, but they know your name is there. So that's important. I'm not sure whether that answers your question, but that's something to start with. Is to generate an idea and develop a sense of how you could, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll have a follow-up question when others have just come in, if there's space later.
Yeah, okay. Precious, you wanted to ask your question too? Is it related to this? Yeah.
Mine is more on where you started. You said where to start, and you talked about looking for the things that excite you. And I just wanted to bring it back to you as somebody who's published for quite a long time and impactfully. What if somebody's bringing an idea to publish with you, what excites you? What are the things that says, this is an idea that I want to jump on?
Well, there are too many things that excite me. and actually, I'm in discussions with my students now who have completed their work, and I've got to prioritize excitement now. And so I would say, you know, this is more exciting than the other. And this is your question, you know, is deeper than perhaps we can read into it.
Okay.
Because what excites me is writing about something that speaks to broader societal issues, something that might not change policy, but it has got it brings an alternative voice to the dominant voices, something that is critical, and we should differentiate criticizing and being critical. And critical scholarship is something that I would say has helped me to be excited about things that I have written about. So if there are critical environmental issues, for example, you know, when we did this book on the violence of conservation, we were just looking at how in conservation spaces you have militarization taking over. Now the military was sent to the Kruger National Park to deal with poaching. And you say, well, that's a good approach, maybe to deal with the problem. But what else does it do to people who have nothing to do with poaching, who live on the side of the Kruger National Park? The drones are flying over their houses, and you know, what does that mean for them? And so the whole militarization of conservation throws up very interesting but troubling questions, and so that has always been something that excites me. Something that's fresh, something that's ongoing, and I wanted to engage with it in order to see, you know, how the world is unfolding before me. You know, unlike historians, and I've no hatred against, you know, for historians, but historians they like things to pass and then they go back to them to sort of see what has happened. But I like to explain things as they unfold, so that I can see the dimensions. I mean, one of the work that I did as part of my PhD was during some of the heated discussions about remapping South Africa, and I wanted to see what is the new map that we're trying to forge, and how do people understand this map? What is the action on the ground? And that theme has continued. I mean, even today, there's still contestations about how we've mapped this country. For example, when you now and then you have got discussions about, oh, maybe we should merge the Eastern Province, the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape. And that's when the politicians are worried about the votes. But what are the impact of that in many things? At some point, the Kruger was divided between Mpumalanga and Limpopo province. Why would you divide a national park? And you know, what happens to how you manage natural resources? So if I'm to answer your question directly, I've always been excited by things that are unfolding, but that are also very difficult to explain. It's a pity I don't work on flooding. I would have been doing research now on the floods in KZN, for example, which have been very disastrous. Is it because of our planning that we end up with flooding like that? Is it, you know, what is it? So yeah, I could go on and on these examples, but I've always been intrigued by things that are unfolding before me. I wanted to explain the world as I see it at the moment.
Okay, that's quite profound, Prof. Actually,
okay.
I have a few follow-ups, but I think I'll also hold them like Princess. There is one that was posed in the chat.
Okay, let me have that.
That says, could you talk more about the process of developing ideas, Prof? How much quote unquote space is there for published ideas, e.g. in a dissertation, early publication, to evolve and for you to even change position and direction? Sorry, where am I? From previous writing, how quote unquote bound are you by prior writings? Different things become important at different times and have different impacts.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I mean, the process of developing ideas is we all have ideas about things, and that's so developing ideas that are publishable. Developing, I would say for postgraduate students, the biggest mistake that they make is not to pay attention to the questions that they're tackling in the dissertation, because that's where the ideas will come from. What are the questions? So ideas are about questions. So if you think of Newton's law of gravity, if you think of you know, influential ideas that have come about, people sometimes were just observing things and then asking questions. You know, why would the apple fall from the tree? You know, and what does it take this direction? And if you just observe, if you're in the city and you just sit down and observe how people move around, you could ask questions about city planning. Why would you plan a city like this? Why would you? What would it make? What will the city look like if where we've closed things, we could have opened them. And so ideas are about questions. And for me, the best dissertation is not so much about the writing skills of the student. It's about the depth of the question being tackled. And in some cases, students are given questions by the supervisors, which is fine. And my students don't always like me because I don't give them the topic. Even the things that I know, I don't tell them that I know. They must find out. I mean, I had an interesting conversation with a student who didn't know that I've written about something that he was grappling with. And when he submitted the dissertation, he stumbled into one of the books, and he said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "No, because I wanted to find out." Okay. Yeah, I can tell you everything I know, and that's why I'm a supervisor, and that's why you pay for that. But with regard to the things I've written, you must find out in the library like any other author. You know, otherwise I could easily say the students should just ask the questions that I've asked, and they should look at them the way I did, which will be indoctrination in my view. So to answer the question about developing ideas, I will say this: the best way to develop the idea is to ask critical questions, to ask deep questions. Now, if you think of people who try to measure the shape of the earth, you know, they wondered, you know, why do you travel from this area and you go back to the same point after a long, long journey? And they figure out that, you know, there must be a shape. So you asking questions, sometimes based on observations, at other times based on the work that we read. The traditional approach to a PhD thesis, maybe this will be more interesting to you, was that you must first read the books about a topic and tell the supervisor what is missing in these books. I mean, that was the approach in the past, and that's why many people just say, I can't read all these books. So it was find out something that has not been said. Okay. And that is what your topic should be about. I think that was perhaps a hard way of doing a PhD, in the sense that you will be overwhelmed by what people have written about, and you will say, well, I don't think there's anything missing here. But my advice will be generate ideas by asking questions. So that's why it should take you longer to start with your PhD, but it's not an easy process. I had a student who really was so upset with me for 6 months because the student was lost trying to find the way. And I said, well, if you're lost, that's a good thing. Because when you find the way, that is your way. Okay. I mean, I can always give you my way, and you just complete your PhD in 2 years, but you found nothing yourself. So that is one way. And how much space is there for published ideas? I would say that there are many spaces now than there were before. And if there are good ideas, there are journals now that are meant for like critical ideas. There are journals that are meant for dissenting voices, for example. And so there's no limitation in terms of where to publish. But if you spend time trying to develop an idea and you're confident that this is a good idea, you should try to, I don't want to say look after it, because people are looking for ideas. You know, there are many people who go to conferences not to present, but to listen to others so that they can get an idea. And so I think it's important to to think of your dissertation. And if the dissertation doesn't have a good idea, in your view, just leave it and ask it different questions. Use the skills that you have acquired to answer that question and get it published. Some people are trapped in the theme of a dissertation. They've done a dissertation on this one topic and they stick to it for the rest of their lives. I don't think that's a healthy. It is good for a start to publish from that topic. But if you have to grow, and this comes back to the question I asked before, if you have started to publish, where else do you go, or what else do you do? I think the next step is to develop your own niche area, which is not influenced by the supervisor or the institutions where you are. Something that you feel should be your own identity. People should know you for having done work on something. And I think that should be an important area. Well, if you've got trusted friends, you can bounce the ideas with them. And I think this is where Canon Collins could be very useful to say, who else can check on whether my idea is not going to be laughable when I send it to a publisher. Or that people will not think that I'm crazy when they read about this idea. Just to see whether things are going in the right direction. And I think that will be quite useful. And of course, the ideas will also be generated by the change that we see around us. The idea that we have about South Africa in 1994 is quite different from what we have about this country today. The idea that we have about Zimbabwe in 1980 is different from the kind of questions we're asking now about Zimbabwe. And so is with Swaziland, Mozambique, and many other countries in the region. So those questions, the questions of the early years of independence, for example, are quite different from what we could be asking now, because some of the expectations also influence the way we ask questions. And we were also more positive about change, and maybe the change hasn't happened the way we thought it would. And even in the natural sciences, some of the things that we thought we understand better, we just look at the virus now, gene sequencing and so forth, has become even more important, that we need to understand and know the genes of the viruses. Have we developed the technologies to do so? In the health systems, things have changed. In education, the learner is a different learner. It's not the learner we were when we were at high school, for example. It's a different kind of generation. And how do we teach these generations? How do these generations learn? It's an interesting question. I think we in education, we're spending so much time on how to teach better. But there could be an interesting question about how students learn better. And what is it that will be required for them to learn better, for example. And that will be, for me, a fascinating question, because it's not more about teaching. Education is more. It's not more about teaching, but it's more about learning. But sometimes we put emphasis on teaching and the teacher, and we put material in there and so forth, which is fine. But I'm not in education. I'm just asking the question that will interest me. It's how do students learn? What is in the minds of students today that will make them learn better? And what skills will they need in the fast-moving world that they can learn better? In a world where there's too much information. In the 2 decades ago, people were struggling because I would say 4 decades ago, people were struggling because there wasn't enough information. Just to find the right book was a difficult thing. And it is still a problem in other places on this continent, where people don't have enough material to read. So if we think of what will be a creative, what will be a powerful question to ask in education, that will generate the kind of ideas that will change the way education works, that will change the way we think about teaching and learning, for example. You know, I'm just throwing that as a very you know, something off the cuff. It's not. I don't work in that area, but I'm just thinking that will be quite interesting. And if you think of the you know, climate systems that have changed, and people can't adapt to that, we need to understand, how did people adapt in climatic crisis in the past? So there's some kind of the history of climate change, which most people in climate change perhaps might be more interested in how the ocean is circulating today and what it is doing. But there could be some environmental history that you go into to understand how environmental change has taken place in the past. And of course, in archaeology, they've done some of this work. They've tried to understand how areas such as the Great Zimbabwe, the Mapungubwe, all those areas have looked like, how those areas looked like some centuries ago, and how the planning and the settlements were. I can go on and on this, but I hope the few examples I gave you is useful.
I don't know. I'm writing away, taking notes, because everything that you're saying is quite spot on. There's another question that was here that I'll just pose to you from Angelique. She's tying in on something that you mentioned a little earlier. And she says that when we write for publication, for example, the task itself is different from writing a paper or essay. And I think now she's going back to the technical aspect of publishing. So she says, for example, many of us can quite easily write and have completed good quality essays, policy briefs, op-eds, for example, in a month or less. But yet when writing a journal article, it can feel so difficult, complex, and time consuming. And so she's asking, why do you think this is so? Why does it feel so much more stressful and strenuous to write an article? And do you have any advice on how to work around this?
Yeah, somebody suggested that because people are so used to writing on WhatsApps, maybe they should start writing a paper as a WhatsApp message, so that they don't feel intimidated. So sort of develop it from there. I think writing for an article becomes intimidating because you know that the audience are going to be critical of what you write. So you get intimidated before you even write. And I think one has to be bold and say that I want to share my thoughts with the rest of the world. And I want to write about this. But journals have got technical requirements. And sometimes people write without knowing what the journal requires. So I will say the first thing is to get the requirements of the journal that you want to publish in. And understand what, whether you can meet those requirements. For example, the journals that I mean, in the field of natural sciences, I'm just saying natural sciences for clarity here. There are journals that require co-authorship in order to succeed. So, if you want to publish in Nature, for example, which is the premier journal in the sciences, in the natural sciences, you can't easily get published alone there. because this is where everybody in the world wants to publish in.
Okay.
So the choice of the journal matters here. And maybe it is important at this stage to understand that journals have got different impact factors themselves. And the impact factor of a journal is decided mainly on whether the papers published in the journal, how often the papers are cited. And the citations of the papers is an indication of the impact of the ideas in those papers. So everybody wants to read those papers because they are quite impactful. So if you're publishing for the first time in a journal, you need to understand the standing of the journals in your field. The journals are divided into sort of 4 categories. You've got the first quartile to the 4th quartile. And so you have to decide where your paper might fit there. So journals in the first quartile are prestigious journals in that field. That is where all the leading authors publish in. And that's where the direction of the field is usually influenced by papers appearing in that journal. So if the journal is more about giving direction to a field, it will be a mistake for you to try and publish there because you're not yet there to give direction. All you want to do is publish your results. And I would say it might be useful to lower your expectations of the level of the journal that you want to use. And in the databases, Web of Science has got a list of all the journals in all the fields where you can find out the standing of these journals. I know there are discussions and debates about whether this is a fair way of even measuring the impact of scholarship. But that will be helpful for the beginner to know that these are the journals. You could look at journals in Scopus. I would say if you look at the Scopus list of journals in Scopus, you could be rest assured that those are not predatory journals in Scopus and publish in those journals. So what makes publishing difficult is for an article is that it takes a bit of time, and people like quick things. but in some fields it can even take a year to get a paper ready. I'm thinking of fields like mathematics, where you have to really spend so much time in order to prepare a paper. In some fields where there are experiments, experiments are quick to come out and the results are there, you can publish the results. But this is difficult to write for a journal because it is going to be reviewed by people who have got expertise in that area. So you have to be speaking the language of the community that you're writing to or writing for. You also have to be very clear about the kind of message that your article brings to the journal that you're writing for. So I will say that writing for a journal is perhaps not different from developing an idea that you want to write and ensuring that you can go of that idea. You will introduce the idea. You will introduce the argument. You will explain how you collected the material and how your findings contribute to knowledge. And that's important, sort of a logical step of writing the journal. So I'm not sure whether that answers the question, Angelique. You can follow up if you think I need to explain a bit more, Angelique.
Yes, thank you, Prof.
I
Okay. Another question?
Princess had a follow-up on Angelique's question there. Princess, you want to go ahead?
Okay. I just asked, is it wise to sort of like wait on special issue calls for call for papers, or you'd rather be hunting on journals of specific interest to you? That was my first follow-up question. Since I have the opportunity, may I ask the second to say, would you recommend that people contribute to book chapters or journals if you want to grow faster and become a professor like yourself? I have a book chapter I submitted in 2019 and it's not yet out, and I'm thinking by the time it comes out, my ideas would possibly be obsolete, or many other people they've written about them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's and my preference will be to write an article than a book chapter. The two are not weighted the same way. They don't have the same weight. There's more respect for writing a journal article than a book chapter. And I think it's because the book chapter has got the editors as the people who determine what goes in and what doesn't go in. And they can also be reviewed, and somebody can say this chapter must be taken out. But you're right, books also take long to come out. You're very lucky because you have submitted recently, and I can tell you, I submitted a chapter in 2009. It only appeared this year.
Whew.
In a book which is written by, well, luckily it's more of a historical material that I had to use, so it's not out of date. But the books can be very tricky, and I would say if you want to accelerate your scholarship, you need to announce yourself in a journal article, because that is peer reviewed and it's very rigorous, but it also teaches you how to write, what to avoid. And if I were to give you another experience I had about writing in my early years, I wrote an article and sent it to an esteemed journal which I did not know that it is of a high standard. And one of the comments, which I remember very well, was that this is pedestrian history. I thought this is an insult. I mean, how can somebody say that? I'm just trying to write. I'm not a historian. I'm just giving some historical background to this thing that I'm writing about. And that's how brutal people can be. And they can discourage you from writing any further. But once you crack it in the journal articles, and these are good journals that you have used, you will be ready to fly. I would say the choice of journals that I made. I mean, I tried to publish in other journals, and sometimes people don't accept your paper. I had a local journal that didn't accept my paper. And I just felt very bad. But interestingly, one of the top journals in the field overseas accepted the paper. And so sometimes these hardships are important. It's almost like when the child grows up and sometimes they fall on the ground and they bleed and so forth. But once they're up and walking, they grow up. They know that they can rise on their own. But you don't have to bleed. I'm not saying that you have to go that difficult route, because now we are here. We should be able to help you to avoid falling and rising on your own. And I've been an editor of journals of different kinds. I'm still an associate editor of one now, and the papers that I've rejected were simply not making an argument, or they were not written properly. They were very, very loose, verbose. But more importantly, they did not make any contribution to knowledge. So it is important that as you write, you should be able to be clear about the contribution that you're making, because that's where the impact comes from. You know, if people are working on agriculture, for example, and they're talking about farming systems that are causing soil erosions, and you demonstrate that actually the methodology used to measure the erosion was false, you know, you make something, you make a contribution methodologically to the field. So I think it's important to think about it that way. I was hoping we could have a break, but I think we can just keep going. If you need to drink water or something, you could do so. Gillian, will that be right? Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Actually, I'm the one who need to drink water, so if I'm still going, that should be fine.
Okay. I mean, we can take 5 minutes if people need it. Just to maybe.
Yeah, we can take 5 minutes break and come back. That's okay.
Yeah, we can take a 5 minutes break, and then when we come back, we can move into the second portion of what you have to share with us, and then we'll take questions as well. And maybe that will be rounding off because time has moved much faster than I thought it would.
Yeah, so when we come back, I'm going to talk about impactful ideas. So that's what and what we mean by impact and how to create impact. So that's what we'll be talking about. Mm-hmm. I don't, well, the easiest thing will be not to log off, but just to
mute yourself for the next 5 minutes, I guess. All right, so it's 25 minutes to right now. We'll be back at 22, and then we'll continue with Prof. Is that fine, everyone?
Thanks, Precious. Yes, and if people wanted to think about questions and put them in the chat in the meantime, do so.
Yeah. I know I have quite a few more questions to ask, so I'm just going to put mine in there. So if anybody wants to comment on them as well, feel free to do that.
Thank you.
If this was the conference like last year, this is the portion where we would have the music intermission, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think we've got any music, but no. People can also just chat to each other if they want to.
Yeah,
you know, like the in-person conference, this would be your coffee break, but just
this would be your coffee break. Okay, I see, Princess, you brought back your question. Yes, I'll make sure I'll highlight it for Prof so that we can. I like how you say, should you pounce? On journal calls. One quick share from me is one of my first articles that I wrote was what I thought was, well, it is one of those journals within our field in education. And it took 18 months to be published, almost 2 years actually, to be published. And throughout those 2 years, you were still editing, you're still receiving comments from reviewers that you're attending to every 3 or so months. And towards the end, then you're told it's accepted, but then now it's 2 years later. So quite a bit of the stuff needs to be updated. You need to update references, you need to update the work that you've cited. It's almost, and once you do that, then it goes back to the reviewers to check if that work is acceptable, and then back to the language editors. It can be quite a frustrating process, actually. So yeah. So I'm also interested, all to say, Princess, I'm interested in how Prof is going to answer your question because, yeah.
I just got a message from Tony. He's saying that he's on Facebook, so he's asked a question from there. I don't know if it is possible to also engage those who are on Facebook and the questions that they're asking.
All right. I think we can do that.
So,
Princess, if oh, sorry, yeah, Carol.
I was just going to say, if anyone from Facebook watching this now has a question, I can post them onto the chat here on our Zoom event. So I can actually see Tony's question, and I will pop that one in the chat here for Prof when he gets back.
Oh, wow. So there's quite a bit of engagement happening on Facebook. Yeah, I hadn't seen all of that.
I'm going to jump into the gap just while we have it. I don't know who's here and who's not, but just in terms of learning and asking questions, one of the things that we as Canon Collins are trying to do is better our learning about what meets scholars and alumni need. So if you have any feedback that you'd like to send us either directly or indirectly, we would be grateful, but we'll ask a question at the end as well. So just jumping in with that. But I see Prof is back now.
Welcome back, Prof.
Okay, thanks. Is everybody back? I see Tony has asked an interesting question there about rejection.
Yeah.
My answer to Tony is very simple. We should embrace rejection is part of the life of an academic. So rejection doesn't mean that you will never make it. It's part of learning. Anyone's paper can be rejected. You know, I've seen professors that are respected very much, with their faces showing sadness because their papers were rejected. Rejection is the way of life. So, I think one should just embrace rejection. And it's almost like one has to manage rejection because it's emotional. Somebody tells you like you're nothing. What you wrote it goes nowhere. But one should manage that. And many people try to respond to the rejection there and there. I think one way of managing that, depending on personalities, of course, is you read the letter that comes through and it's rejected, you put it aside. You don't even think about it. You will reread it again when you're sober.
There was another question, Prof, before you go on to the next section. Somebody's asking, is it wise to wait and pounce on special issue calls for papers, or we should rather approach specific journals of interest?
Special issues are good because they allow, the special issue editors might give you some feedback before the paper goes on review. So you're supported there. But in the past, people thought special issue means that there's a special privilege that comes with that opening. But many serious journals do not give authority to special issue editors to decide on whether the paper should be accepted or not. It should be the blind review, the reviewers that will be used. So the advantage of a special issue is that you have got support systems within the issue. The editors will tell you whether this paper will make it or not. But I don't think you should wait for that because they are not always easy to come by.
Yeah, that's all from the chat box, Prof. I think we can move ahead.
Okay, so I want to go to the idea of impactful ideas. So I mean, I've touched on this, but I want to sort of consolidate what my thoughts are on impactful ideas. I refer to asking the questions, which is a source of ideas and observations and experiments and so forth. But impact is measured in different ways. In academia, impact is measured in the journal outlets, the publications outlet that you use. So even if your journal is not very strong, if it appears in one of the top ranked journals, it will earn the impact by being in an impactful journal, so to speak. But impactful ideas that I think are publishable. If you want to generate impactful ideas that are publishable, you should be looking at what drives many of the systems in the world. Whether these are ecological systems, political systems, economic systems. So if you have if you're just looking at your case study of Soweto, for example, the case study of some village that many people would not know about, you have to draw a map to direct people where your research is based. That limits the impact by its very nature of being too local. So there are papers that will never have the impact, even if they are well written, because they're talking about a very localized issue that somebody in China will have no interest in. Somebody in Brazil will have no interest in because it doesn't speak to the wider issues that they have. So if you look at people who have made impactful, who have published impactful ideas, they've got a global scope, of course, with local material. So the empirical evidence has been lifted to a level where they speak to world systems more generally. I'll give one example. Amartya Sen wrote a book on development is freedom. And many people have been writing about development for ages. But this book just individualized freedom within a more global context. And it became very impactful. So I'm just giving this as an example of, there are dissertations, there are journal articles, there are books that will never make the impact, however well written they are, or they might be, simply because they don't speak to bigger things in life. If you think of the artists, people who, let me just use, artists who work in music. If you follow classical music, they are music that have got an endless lifespan, because they speak about something that's more real in life, irrespective of the times in which people are living. So that's what we mean by an impactful, something that has got impact. But impact could also mean that you're writing something that goes against established ways of thinking, something that challenges the way we conceptualize things. And that kind of impact could come in different forms, one of which is using concepts. Concepts are very powerful in the production of knowledge. And if you can generate a concept that explains your observations, that explains your experiments, your field work in ways that people did not usually think about, you make an impact there and there. And I mean, I've got experience with this in one of the journal articles that I wrote with a colleague in the Netherlands. And the concept has just become so exciting to people who want to think about conservation issues, conservation in society, for example. But we never realized how powerful the impact would be. It's because the concept brings in the way of thinking that wasn't necessarily part of the vocabulary. It brings in the way of seeing the world in a different lens. And I can guarantee you, if you generate new concepts through your own research, the impact will be quite useful. But that's one level of impact. The other level of impact, of course, is in society. And as Canon Collins, we always want to have impact on society. It's how we write in such a way that the social conditions of people, especially marginalized people, will get their attention intellectually, but also in policy arenas, in the policy domain rather, in the way that perhaps will shake those who are thinking about these aspects. Most of the ideas that have maintained the inequalities in the world relied very much on scholarship. So ideas that sustain the inequalities that we see in the world are actually generated by scholars. So the impact that we could make is to generate ideas that turns this around, that brings issues of inequality to the fore. I'm just giving that in the social sciences. A lot is happening with regard to the environment, for example, where the way everybody is now being advised to do some of these, to do some of the things like whether it's sustainable development goals, the 17 goals that we have, are sort of driving the way people should think about what they should do to make the world a better place. But some of the things are just recycling the very same ideas that were there in the first instance, there before. And I can see in some of these new goals, there's nothing that could be achieved that would be miraculous. Because the ideas haven't changed. I think there's a hand up there.
Yes, there's a hand from Atenkosi. Go ahead, Atenkosi.
Thank you so much. Prof, I think you've broadened my perspective so much with regards to particularly the academic writing, but also just being a scholar who's careful going into publishing, as well as sort of like forming both national and international relationships in terms of being an academic. So I want to speak on the part of interrelationships. So you mentioned that some people sometimes have this sort of like lack of, maybe let's say they box themselves within what they were doing in their thesis or what they were writing or their theme, as you mentioned. But some people are able to sort of like say, I'm in education, but I know that education has an impact in economics, topics, education as an impact. So different people are able to sort of like, then like an example of that, a product of that will be an article of a researcher from the education background, economics background, as well as climate background, but they have sort of like managed to find an intersection in academia that makes sense in order for them to publish an article that speaks on those three different fields. I just want to ask in terms of how, particularly on the scholarship, how do you think the scholarship can go about in terms of creating interactions or rather networks that allows us as scholars to think outside our themes, outside of education, that we can be able to say, just like as you've mentioned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, that there are 17 of them. Some deal with education, some with nutrition, some with job creation. So how would you say that we as scholars can sort of like develop a mindset that looks beyond just our own themes and sort of like form relationships with each other that allows us to say, an article or a journal was developed by these scholars who came from different backgrounds? How do you think that we can achieve that as scholars?
Yeah, this is a challenge that I've been thinking about with regard to Canon Collins scholars. We're all doing very, exciting but different research topics. Is there a way we can think about bringing this together as Canon Collins scholars, for example? And some years back, we had a discussion with one publisher. We invited a publisher as Canon Collins can't remember, Gillian, whether it was in Johannesburg. I can't remember where we were at that time. It could have been at Wits when we had some of these meetings, but I can't remember. Anyway, the point is that we invited one of the leftist publisher, to come and give us a sense of what they will require if we were to publish something. It was more about publishing. It wasn't so much about that we had a project, but just to get a sense of what the publishers would look for. And I think that was a very useful idea. And I still think that it is possible that Canon Collins scholars could sit together and say, what did we find? So if we ask people in education, what did you find in education through your dissertation? And move away from answers that blames the government, for instance. But to say we found that teaching and learning is hampered by this. This is a big thing, whether you're teaching mathematics, physics, for example. Yeah, then people who are working in these areas would be able to contribute to that discussion. If we have people who are working on marine science, in agriculture, all living things, for example, in the life sciences, I wanted to say, and ask them, what did you find out? And what do you think should be done? I mean, in the social sphere, there are just so many possibilities of bringing in what people found in order to ensure that there is a discussion. So you need different kinds of meeting here, which will bring people to leave away what they know and ask new questions, but then go to what they know to answer those questions, or to see that maybe those questions need some new material to be dealt with. Yeah, I think that's an exciting thing for me. To be honest, I think it will be a true reflection of the scholarship that Canon Collins is.
Yeah. Maybe it could be something that we can talk about at the conference, make space for it at the conference this year, Jill. There's another hand up, Prof. I'm sorry to sort of rush you because I noticed our time is running away, but there's somebody who had their hand up as well. Rejoice, do you want to go ahead? And welcome, by the way.
Thank you, Precious. I think just to respond and to add, for me, I feel there are two levels of doing that engagement. For example, if we're going to be using the Canon Collins platform, I know I attended, there was a collaboration of researchers, what they call the researchers from the Global North, researchers from the Global South, but it was funded by the UK government. What they did was you'd all come together, different people from the natural sciences, social sciences, to come up with global solutions. So that could be used where people were doing, I'll use dating for just the sake of it, like speed dating, where you just, I can't remember the word, but I'm just using that as a way of trying to come up with a concept. But you'd stand up for 3 minutes, talk about your area of interest, or a minute, share your area of interest where you need collaboration. And from there, people started collaborating across different fields to come up with papers, to come up with research projects. So you could come up with a paper, someone saying, okay, I've written about this, but I'm interested in the social science aspect of it. I think that can be done in a Canon Collins kind of setup, because we have different fields. Someone can come up, like Aten Kosi, for example, who's looking for collaboration and saying, I'm in the education field, but I'm looking at this. There's someone maybe in mathematics or in whatever can contribute. So I think that's a practical way of using the Canon Collins platform. That's one way. The other way is to be part of, when you attend conferences, even outside of the Canon Collins one, try to look for conferences that are multidisciplinary, because that's where you get ideas from different people who are working on different sets of things. And from there, you can come up with papers. I've done that. Written with people that are in natural sciences to come up with papers. For example, the environment, I write about women farmers, and also just going to people, for example, who are looking at animals, for example, in Botswana, but they wanted the gender dynamics of it, and coming together, writing papers. So I think there are different ways that one can be creative around collaboration. It comes out by going into places where it's not just people from your own fields. So using the Canon Collins or external meetings, conferences, and building relationships and looking at people that want to collaborate. Thanks.
No, that's very useful. And I think there's so many opportunities for collaboration. And what I would caution is that collaboration itself has its own politics. Okay, so I know that in some countries, if you want to do research, there must be capacity building, and people in Africa are always seen as lacking capacity. So it becomes a tick box to say we've got somebody that we can build capacity on here. So what I often appreciate is when people have, I've got this sort of the same understanding of what they are working on, and there is mutual respect, because it is not always given. And there are difficulties in some of these things. And so, I've been part of some of the projects that I felt this is more about ticking the box. And so I think one needs to be careful about that. So you made a very important point about Rejoice, about going to interdisciplinary conferences, because then that's where you generate ideas, where people look at things from different angles. So that's very useful. Yeah, in the interest of time, I think I'll stop there, but I've got a lot to add to that. Anything beyond the time we were given, Gillian, is at the cost of Canon Collins.
I think there's the benefits far outweigh the cost, which are very negligible. Maano, I think it's more your time, and you've been incredibly generous both with your time and with your huge capacity and experience. So I think it's completely up to you and anyone who wants to stay, if you want to have any other questions you'd like to ask. But I know that we have reached the end of the agreed time, Maano.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I can stay for a few more minutes. If there are burning questions, I think what Rejoice has just said now is something that could be picked up at a conference on how we think about even conferences. Because at our conferences, we do bring people who are outside Canon Collins, who come speak to us. Sometimes they're just speakers. We have activists, but I think at times we're just excited about the actions. But I always think that for scholars, it should be what ideas do we have from here? What are the ideas that we're generating? Because I can tell you that the best way to generate ideas is to put people in the room. In one room, we generate ideas. In the conversations, one of the papers that I'm very, which has become very, I would say, for lack of better words, which became very impactful was something I discussed with a friend at when we met at a hotel, and we were just talking about things, and we actually came out with the idea, and we put it down as an idea, and then started thinking about it. So that's why people spend time going to conferences, because they know they will come up with something there. And I have moved away from going to the conference to present my work to going to the conference to listen to people and generate ideas. So that's I think people are excited to go to the conference and say, show the dance, and this is what I've done. And that's fine, we need to do that. But I've also realized that I can't pay for a ticket just to go and present for 15 minutes and go back. I must get something out of the conference. And this should be challenging the way I think. So I present, and I want people to challenge the way I think, so I can generate even more ideas. So I've researched on things that were not necessarily even part of my PhD, and others. I know somebody who mistakenly quoted one of the books as a thesis from University of Cape Town. Which was an indication of people not even reading what they're citing. Yeah, but maybe what we could do, and this is for the conference organizers to think about, is have a space to think about issues so that we can generate ideas. So we can't sit together and say, what are the ideas there? I mean, it's more about what are the issues affecting the region for you? What are the key things affecting Southern Africa as a region? As an example, very often we think of solutions to those problems, but understanding those problems in an intellectual sense is important. And I would think that is the way to go. To sometimes to ask in the region, and maybe move away from small things that that are practical, that we can fix. We can say we don't have roads and so forth, but we can't generate ideas by giving those examples. I think ideas will come by why do we have roads like this? What's happening? What are the processes? What are the systems in place? And how is the world shaping the way we are in the region? That and in all fields, whether it's medicine or or in economics, we should be able to generate some ideas there. We've all heard about the Chicago School of Thought, which, it has become a Chicago style in terms of referencing. But that's an idea coming from Chicago. People who sat down and thought about what is the best way to appreciate other people's work. It has become a global reference point of how we go about,
Thank you, Prof. I was just posting a question which doesn't necessarily need to be answered now. Forward. Somebody's asking in the chat and they're saying, is it wise to translate their thesis or commit their thesis into a book as recommended by their examiners, or should they rather publish many journal articles from it? That's one question there, Prof. Can I take two questions and then you can address them at the same time?
Yes, we can.
Clayton, would you want to come through with your question?
Yeah, sure. Perhaps it could be a basic issue, but it's about publishing the work that you're still working on. If you're working on a PhD thesis, and far go in terms of publishing some of my results, and am I not preempting myself? What is okay and what is not in terms of publishing results that you are yet to put into a thesis? How do I balance that? It gets me stalling sometimes.
Yeah, so let me start with this question of, if you publish your results before the thesis, you can ask for permission to include the paper in the thesis. I'm not sure whether all universities will have that, but I guess so, because many universities would prefer to have papers coming out of the thesis. The good thing about publishing a paper before the thesis is examined is that the examiners would know that you have already published, and so the the expert audience has already given you a thumbs up when it comes to the research you've done. So actually, it weakens any criticism against the thesis, because one of the key questions that is asked about the thesis is whether it is publishable.
There's that question on whether someone should commit their thesis into a book, or they should rather publish many journal articles out of it.
My preference will be to generate journal articles if you want to be in academia, because if you put everything in a book, you need to have another sort of thesis to publish the journal articles, and that's going to take years. You can publish your journal articles from the thesis and then rework those journal articles into a book, something which I haven't done. I rather have a book or journal articles, but I've seen that there is also a possibility that after publishing your journal articles, you could rework some of the material into a book, and in that way, it's not necessarily double dipping, but you are bringing in your scholarship into a consolidated whole.
Thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself. I think maybe, Prof, we will round off. Maybe if you can give us your closing statement, and then I'll hand over to Nia and Jill to round off this amazing conversation for us. I can't believe it's been 2 hours already. Thank you so much, Prof. If you can give us, just as a way of rounding off for us, some of your key points that you want us to take home.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, which reminds me of my sort of early years as a young scholar, trying to find my way through the publishing complex space. But I think the most important thing that I remember up to this day is that when you publish, you should not waste your material. So you have to look after your material. There are also thieves out there that are looking for ideas, and you have to. And sometimes the thieves are your supervisors. I must just be honest about this. Okay, and so one has to. Luckily, I don't know your supervisor, so they can't blame me for saying this. But it's important that you look after your ideas, because the world runs on the basis of ideas. The world is controlled on the basis of ideas. And so it is important that whatever generates an idea, you look after it. And this will also mean you don't simply publish it in some obscure publications, whether it's a book chapter that nobody will read or doesn't circulate globally. So if you're writing a chapter, you should find out whether the editors themselves are well-known figures in the field. So if you're invited by editors who are well-known in the field, you should go with them, because they will introduce you to a field. They will introduce you to the community of scholars in that field. But if they themselves are not well established, they just want to say they've edited a book and your chapter is in there, it could be lost forever. So I will say, be careful with that approach. The same with journal articles. But I think what I wish all of us could do is to write something that people will know, or will be our own trademark. People will know, if you want to read about this, this is the person to read. That's what we should be aiming for in order to have that impact. Some people have written one book, and that only one book is a trademark for them. And others have written many books and nobody knows about them. So I think that's a trap that we need to be careful about. So thank you very much for the questions, which have helped me to think about myself as well. So you have helped me to be even a better scholar. You might not have realized it, but in asking the questions, you're helping me to be a better person. And that's what I benefit from communication, from interactions with people. I always want to get something out of the, so I don't want to sound like art insurance, but I always want to get something out of the people I met. If it's from my students, they've shaped the way I've thought about the world. So thank you very much for organizing this event.
Yeah, thank you so much. Prof, I think your level of humility is so amazing, so amazing. I will speak for, I think, a lot of us in this. We're so excited, and the level of engagement was so good, even though we had a quite intimate group. Maybe because we had an intimate group, the level of engagement was so good, as well as the knowledge that you're sharing. I think it's something that a lot of us young academics, we are thirsty for. We need to have somebody hold you by the hand and say, haze the way, it's already been paved, you can take this way or that way. That's amazing. And thank you so much for your time and your humility to share that. And I think there are also ideas to carry forward to the conference, Jill. There's quite a few in the chat box that I think we can talk about in preparation for the upcoming conference. So yeah, now I'm saying too much. I will hand over to Jill and Nia, just so that you can round up this amazing time that we've had.
I think, Precious, you've said it all. Maano, just to say, building the Canon Collins network is really something we're very committed to doing, and you role model it so beautifully in terms of your generosity, sharing your expertise and your experience, giving even your reflection on taking. It's just so valuable. So huge thank you to you for your time and your input, and thank you to every one of you for being here. We still have 11 people and it's nearly 6:20. I think we've got really, really a unique set of people. We're such a resource for one another, and this idea of taking this discussion forward at the conference is very exciting. So we'll follow it up, but a huge thank you to all of you for the contributions you make in your different ways, and just for your voices and your presence. Thank you. And have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Mia, for putting it together. Jill, everyone. Bye.
Thank you,
everyone.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Maano.
Hello.
I just